There's a principle in the Bible that I like to operate by. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, right? I like that because Satan can only interrupt those things you publicize. If you keep something to yourself, do you not know Satan will never mess with it? He'll never do it. He can only work with those things that you make visible to others, and he will influence others to interfere with those things, right? Which is why most people who are taken over by darkness, they have an obsession of going to find out things and stuff. They just have that obsession. And they'll do whatever they have to do to discover things. They have that obsession. Well, this is part of the draconian system coordination, supernatural coordination, by the way, used against most things that anybody of the Lord will put out there. Remember, God's people are humble, but they're powerful by way of love, which means once they set their eyes and focal point on something ahead of them, they do so by way of love. And so love attracts many different components of opposition. And they will always try to discourage somebody from going forward. But those who are persistent in love, they never stop. They just keep going forward. And so the Lord laid out some principles for those who operate in love, right? By the way, the Lord is the one that, if I might say, engineered us, made us, had us made this way. But the same one who made us, which is our Father, also made the path before you. And that path he knows very well, and he knows you very well, and he made you to walk in that specific path. Once you find that path, be persistent in walking in that path that the Lord has already preordained for you, which means there's a walk in life for each of us, right? That God has already designed, and he made you, right? And he made that walk specifically for you. And if you find that through your humility and meekness, and through your surrender to him, right? When you stop trying to push at him and make up your own paradigm in life, you'll find it. And once you do find it, you'll find that you're supernaturally protected in those things you desire to do for the Lord. All right? You become one and the same with your calling. It's what happens, and you find yourself on the path you're supposed to be on. And because the Father does not work in excesses, he works just in time. In other words, it's almost like daily miracles will happen in your life when you really, really need something, right? It'll be there. It's on that path all the time. And if we could remember that, right? Because Satan spends all of his time trying to get you away from that path. He can also see that path, right? So he's going to work to get you off the path God has laid out for you. Again, you were sent here. You're specifically made, all your characteristics, right? You're specifically made that way. You're made that way to walk a path. That path God designed. And he put you, that path is for you. Through your surrender, humility, and meekness, you'll find that path. Once you're on that path, be persistent by way of love, right? By way of love, which is to say, Lord, I'll serve you no matter what. Right? Knowing that your servitude in the kingdom is going to really help out your brothers and your sisters. Right? But take note how it works. Satan is on the left and to the right of that path. And he will always launch assaults against you. All you have to do is stay on that path. But all too often, he convinces people to get off the path for a few minutes. Right? Take a left here and there. That's when we get ourselves in trouble. If you were to stay on that path and not move, because if anything, Satan would launch against you, you'd find that everything you ever needed is right there on that path. Your provision is on that path. Your sanity is on that path. What you need to bolster your faith and continue on is in that path. Your healing is in that path. Whatever you need is in that path. Now take note of needs. God knows exactly what you need. So, for example, if he wanted me to be an example to 1,000 people, so for 2 miles of my own path, I had to walk sick, and he designed it that way. I had to be careful to walk in his ways, right? And to be understanding, asking, Lord, what am I sick for? But be obedient at the same time, not rebel against it. I'd be careful of that, because they may want to use me as an example to all these other folks looking, that if you stay on this path, you know, your healing is there. But in order for people to learn that, they have to see you sick, right? You got to be a vessel of usage. And that's just the way it works, right? So we have to be careful to, if one could be careful to walk that path that he has preordained for you and you for it, you're going to find life is very different. Now, I certainly do hope that our talk of intimacy about Christ the other day really sunk in. I hope it really sunk in, because if you walk with that thought in your mind, you're going to have nothing but forward momentum. You're going to be like Joshua, right? Seeing a bunch of giants in front of you and say, well, let's go anyway. Let's go. You're not going to stop. Not because you're strong, not because you're robust, right? But because you love Christ and you absolutely are appreciative of what he did for you, and your thanks can never be enough. And so that's going to become a driving factor, and you won't slow down. You just won't. That's when you find your life changes. And that's true humility and meekness, is when you realize that the value the Father put upon you is much more than you can ever see in yourself, right? Because if you can recognize the love the Father has upon you, your love for others is going to raise. You're going to become a different person. Very encouraging, right? At the right times, not the wrong times. Very understanding. The Lord will then, as a result of that, because once you step into that domain, you're no longer accusing and pointing fingers. God will open up your eyes. He's going to open up you're going to be allowed to utilize things that have safeguards on them. All of you have gifts, but they have safeguards on them. They can only unlock in an atmosphere of love itself. They're not going to unlock in any other atmosphere. You're not going to have the right motivation to align with them nor utilize them. So within you is a gift locked up in love, right? That gift is within you. But if you don't operate in love, you don't have access to that gift. And have you noticed at high states of when you have a high state of caring for somebody else, all of a sudden, you start to notice things in the world very different than you usually would. In situations that are quite scary, you can become very peaceful and calm and really be an encouragement to others. Not because you're trying to be an encouragement, because you start to see the truth of the entire situation. All right? But if you're hateful, then all of your giftings that God has gifted you with, you can't access them. You can't access them. Those will only be accessed in an atmosphere of love, right? That's when the true you stands up, right? The one God sent here. Not the hateful one that's been rejected by the world, that lost everything. Not that person. That's the old man. Everybody has that story. But the person God sent here, that new spirit he put inside of you, right? The one you operate by, the one that yearns for Christ, the one that has no trickery, no deception, no any of those things, that spirit yearns for righteousness. And when you begin to, when you find yourself in high states of compassion for somebody else, that's who stands up within you, and all these giftings become available to assist your walk. And it's so funny in that time, because in that moment, that high state of compassion, you don't even see them as gifts. You see them as a necessity for you to walk. Is so different. When you walking within yourself, you'll call them gifts. But when you begin to operate by these things, you will not call them gifts, because they're so normal. Right? You begin to see truth. They're normal. You're also not fooled by anybody either. Right? You're not tricked anymore. You can see right through all plans, all darkness, all everything. Right? And that really takes a person centering themselves in God's love, not trying to conjure up some type of a definition for love, but to seek out Christ, to remember what he did, and to have a high state of praise within your heart, a thankfulness in your heart for that. That's where it begins. And once that thankfulness rises to a certain degree, you'll start to walk in love. You'll want to do things for other people, and that desire to be compassionate towards others, no matter what. That's how the Lord walked. He walked through people who hated him, and yet he still was a blessing unto them. He knew the crowd, each and every single one. He could perceive their thoughts. He never once pointed a finger. He would correct. He didn't point a finger, not like we do. We point a finger because we're offended, because somebody, kind of stroked our ego the wrong way. Jesus taught on a continuous basis. Jesus warned by way of truth on a continuous basis. Jesus encouraged on a continuous basis, and Jesus was an example on a continuous basis. Right? That's our example. Not walking after men. You can't walk like I walk, right? Don't copy after me, right? Just like I won't copy after you. But I will look at the Lord. We can refine what we both know and begin to refine our walks after the manner of Jesus. Because is he not our standard? His forgiving ways, his tireless efforts, his selfless service to the Father, right? His loving everybody so much that he gave his life. He was scared to death at one point. Jesus was, because he was in the flesh like we are. The Bible says he was in all points tempted as we are, but without sin. Now that means he was in a high state of fear, right? He was at a very high state of fear. That's why I said, Father, can you take this cup away from me? Nevertheless, thy will be done. He was frightened. He could see what was coming. But for respect of his Father and love of his Father, because to love the Father is to understand you. Do you know that? Jesus understood the Father. And for that reason, he could see you, because Jesus was sent because of God's love for you. That's why he was sent. Jesus, knowing the Father, could see you very, very well. And guess what? You became his strength going to the cross. That's in the Bible also. You know how when you're tired, you're worn down, you just can't go another step. All of a sudden, an infant needs your help. An infant cries, right? And you really can't take another step. But when you hear that infant cry, everything raises up within you, and it says, "No, I'm checking this out. Nothing better harm that infant." And if it be your last breath, you'll utilize that to get to that child. That love is the same love our Lord walked in, multiplied by 1 billion, probably. Right? So we can only imagine the level of that love. But we can certainly liken it to our unconditional love of an infant. Right? And again, an infant cannot do anything for us. They can't do anything for us. They can't help around in the house. They certainly don't make it smell better. Right? They certainly don't make it to where you can get a good night's sleep. They do the opposite. They take away from everybody's lives they're involved with. And they poop and smell and do all sorts of stuff all over the place, right? They cry at the wrong time. They wait till the middle of the night to start playing, or whatever the case is. They take away from you. But how many parents do you hear complain about their infants? You don't hear that, do you? Why? Because they love them. Only if a parent hated that infant, in which case that wouldn't be a parent at all. But only if a parent couldn't stand that infant would you hear a complaint like that. Mothers will tell you, I had to stay up all night with her, but I'd do it again. That's a mother's heart. A dad's heart is, I'll die to protect that infant. I don't care what kind of pain a male is in, right? His leg could have fell off or something like that. He's still going to use the other leg to do everything he can to protect that infant. That's first and foremost, to protect and provide for that infant. And nothing will stop that male from doing that. Nothing. It doesn't matter what comes. Nothing will stop that male from... It's incredible when it comes to an infant, right? And a true father is in the home. A true dad is in the home. That dad will never give an excuse as to why he cannot provide for that infant. That's the strangest thing, don't you think? He'll never give anybody an excuse why he couldn't provide for the infant, but he will say, I'll be back with what the child needs. And he's willing to do anything to obtain it. Now just imagine if our love inside, by way of truth, was like that one toward another. Not one of us would have an issue. Not one. Number one, because our discernment level would be so high. See, because when you care like that, you tend to see everybody. You tend to see everybody you're in contact with. You see the hidden things they don't want to tell you. right? You know their struggles and everything else. You'll never blame them, point a finger at them, get offended by them, by anything they do. You will seek to help them, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. That's what happens when you can truthfully see another human being. But if you can only see the surface and the deeds of an individual, that's where you say, I don't like that person because they did this, or I don't like that person because they did that. You don't like a person because of what they have committed, right? Which is that's a person who's not yet had their eyes opened. Because when your eyes are open, you can see what a person committed. But then you can also see what they desire. And I'll tell you the truth, there's some bad people outwardly in the world who desire beautiful love in their lives, and because they don't get it, it's almost like somebody's killing them every single day. And so they give in to darkness. They start doing things with this nonchalant attitude. Right? When the Lord opens the eyes of his children, you could go up to a murderer and make a huge difference in that murderer's life. Because you know what? Everybody on earth requires one thing. Anybody know what that is? Besides air, besides water, besides food, besides, nutrients and clothing. What do they require? What do they require? There's one thing everybody requires. And when they don't get this requirement, they go sour. What is it? Somebody tell me what it is. What is it? That's right, it's love. They require love. When they don't receive love, that's when they turn rotten. They're like rotten fruit. They're just like rotten fruit, like fruit not getting ample amount of sunlight. If it's left in the shade too long, it can extract or receive the nutrients it needs from the sun to make that chemical exchange in the flesh of that fruit, and it starts to go rotten. Right? When a person receives love, their life comes out different. Most people right now come from broken homes. Do you guys know that? As a result of that, look at our society. The majority of the people you see in society right now, the majority of the folks who are involved in these protests and everything else, they come from broken homes. And one of the biggest problems with these individuals is when you come from a broken home, you're always frightened something is being taken away from you. You're tired of missing elements you should have had in your life. And so they look at life as something is always being stolen. And that's how they walk through life. Like something is always being stolen from me. Others walk through life like, somebody is always messing up something in my life. Those who come from they don't have a broken home, but they're nurtured properly by mom and dad in the household, right? That gives them strength. And when they have strength, they can believe in anything, go forward with whatever they believe the world to be, right? They have a strength, a home base, a platform of which they can jump from. But a person from a broken home, it's almost like they have to fight to find placement in this world. All right? Most of the people you deal with right now come from broken homes. There are a lot of fatherless children out there, is what I'm saying. They don't have a father's guidance, right? They only have the mother's guidance. You know what that means for us gentlemen out there, right? People are hungry for a father figure. They really are. They really are. Now that means some of you gentlemen out there, when a female comes up to you and she's talking to you, right? She has an interest in what you're saying. That doesn't mean you go and date the woman. Normally it means there's something in you she has been missing in her life. Don't use that to date a person. Use it for God's purpose. You sound the way you do because of your father. You look the way you do because of your father, right? All that attracts a certain type of person into your life. Not for you to date, not for you to marry in most cases, but for you to depart what the Lord has put in you, because all of you like that are burning with the Word of God inside of you. You just can't be overwhelmed by the eye. Never do that. Utilize what the Lord gave you with an upright heart, always with His goal in mind. You know what His goal is? That all flesh be saved. Now we know that won't happen. The Father told us this will not happen. All flesh will not be saved. But He did say that's His desire. He desires no one perish outside of Him. But He said there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's what He said. There will be weeping, of gnashing of teeth. So we know there are people who don't make it, right? They're going to burn. They're going to be down in a dimension or place separated from all love, all light, all hope, all everything, right? We know that. But we shouldn't want to rush anybody there. If that desire be in you, to rush somebody into that place, you're operating by hidden anger. There's still a root of bitterness in you. One of the charges before the Lord comes back is that we purge ourselves of some things, right? And believe it or not, there's a list of things you're not to have in you when he comes back. They are to be gone. And do you know that most people do not operate by that word? They don't. You know what they say? Well, God will take it out when he gets here. He understands. He sure does. He gave you all this time to purge yourself, to understand, to comprehend. He gave us the tools. Not one of us has an excuse to say we really didn't know, because we do. We'd be lying to ourselves if we said that. Many of us burn with a revenge within us. We won't admit it. But there are things we want revenge from. There are things we're so skeptical of that if we're tipped to the wrong direction, we're ready to lash out at somebody. And all these things must be purged. It must be purged. All of that's part of darkness, and light has no fellowship with darkness. Do you guys know what that means? Here's what it means. It is impossible for light to ever have fellowship with darkness, because it can't happen. It cannot happen. If you're full of light, you're not going to have darkness, right? You're just not going to be full of darkness. If you're full of light, you will not be full of darkness. If you're full of darkness, that means there's an absence of light. You cannot have both. You can't. That's why light has no fellowship with darkness, because it's almost like saying, you know, if you were to tell somebody the ocean does not float above your head, right? Well, we know that's not going to happen. Well, if something weird took place, it could, but we know generally that's not the way it is, right? It's almost like physics, correct? So there are certain things in physics that are impossible. They're just impossible. They don't mix. They don't mix. Light and darkness are the same way. If you shine a light in darkness, it's no longer darkness. No matter how dim the light is, it becomes light. But if you turn the light out, you have darkness. Correct? So they have no fellowship with one another, because it's impossible for them to become one in the same. It's impossible. So that means you're either one way or the other. There is no in between. It's a delusion to believe there's an in between. Why do you think the lukewarm are going to be spewed out of the mouth of God? That's in between. That has no placement anywhere. It doesn't exist. Right? So you're either hot or cold. This lukewarm stuff does not exist. It also gives insight to a corrupted character. Somebody who will not choose good nor evil, but will play both sides based upon what's best for them. And they have no placement. Now, spewed out of the mouth of God is a total rejection. If you're spewed out of his mouth, you take no part with his word. None. And who knows where that leads, right? Who knows where that leads? So, light has no fellowship with darkness. So in truth, folks, when we are in this world, and suppose you're sitting up getting steamed about something you see on TV, what you actually did was invite darkness into yourself. You're in agreement with darkness. You're in agreement with punishment, right? You're in agreement with vengeance. You're in agreement with accusation and all those things. Can you see that? That's what you're in agreement with, and it changes you emotionally. When you reject that, and you hear things with your ears, but you always run them through the Savior's filter, you will not accuse. You will begin to identify a problem, in which case you may start praying. Lord, help so-and-so to see. Right? Like President Biden. He was sleeping. I said, oh, Lord, give him strength. Because he was out for the count. Right? He was out. Joe Biden he's an older guy. He really is an older guy. No matter what anybody says, he's an older guy. He's very close to the time when people go away. He really is. He's very close to the age when people pass. That's where he's at right now. So is Trump. He's very close to the age where people pass, period. And I can almost guarantee you people are not truly prepared for that. And if it should happen, what in the world will they do then? Right? I'm sure there's some people are ready and wanting it to happen so they can get their foot in the door. But as a whole, I'm talking about you guys. Most people are not prepared to deal with something like that because it will start fights again. All right? And what they don't understand, just a side note before I take a break, what they don't understand is there's a serpent waiting for just a scenario. There's a serpent right now waiting. And when that serpent takes its position, it will release millions of other serpents. And they will slither all over the face of the earth.